What's going on, everybody? I'm Chris Dailey, founder of the Sports Court, joined here by Shon Niswanger, who is a senior production editor at Dude Perfect. Just awesome guy so far from what I know about you. This is obviously take two. But without further ado, can you just jump into when you wanted to be an editor and how that all came about? I know it was when you're at Texas A&M, so just talk about that story and getting involved with the Texas A&M production team.
Yeah, absolutely. First, yeah, to meet you and pleasure to get to talk to you. Yeah, it wasn't always something that I wanted to do. I didn't grow up wanting to get into film or editing or anything like that. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went to A&M just to get a business degree. Figured it was generic enough that I could figure it out after and go from there. But my freshman year, we had somebody from the A&M athletic department come and give a lecture on, college athletics and the business of that. And at the end of it, he mentioned like, oh, by the way, hey, our athletic program is hiring student workers to come and help out on the production side of things. So if you have any interest in that at all, like, apply. And I figured, hey, I have tons of free time. I might as well. That could be fun. I could use a job. And so went and interviewed with 12th Man Productions and ended up getting the job, hired on at 7.25 an hour, but really just fell in love with it after that. I got to do so many different things, and it was right when A&M was joining the SEC from the Big 12, and with that, they brought the SEC network. And so as a student worker, I was getting to do, broadcasts for the SEC network, running camera, replay operator, technical directing, producing, directing, all that fun stuff. And yeah, just fell in love with it, figured that was more fun than accounting and finance, and just loved having a camera in my hands. So just kind of ran with it after that.
Yeah, it's definitely more fun than accounting. I took that class 2 years ago in high school. It's terrible, but yeah.
Oh,
So without
it's
further,
a rough one.
yeah, without further ado, now you go to Texas A&M right after the Johnny Manziel boom. I watched the Netflix documentary. The amount of
Mhm.
money they made off of Manziel and Mike Evans is absurd. Now with NIL, I can only imagine how much those guys would have made. Definitely, maybe
Mhm.
10 million at that point. Just how big of a name he was.
Yeah.
So just talk about also being at Texas A&M at that time. It was really just a great place to be if you're a college football fan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, growing up in Austin was always, the University of Texas, and I grew up rooting for them and Vince Young and watching the '05 national championship and that kind of thing. And had never really thought about A&M until, my older brother went there. So he's a year and a half older. So he was there for the Johnny and Mike years and the Heisman and all that fun stuff. And I remember getting to go to a game with him and just thinking of how electric the place was and how much energy was behind the program at the time with the entrance into the SEC and with Johnny and Mike and those players, and really just fell in love with the energy and just the heartbeat and passion that there is in College Station, and kind of reemergence of that program. So decided that's where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be, and it was awesome. I was sad I wasn't a student there when Johnny was there, but coming right off of it, it just felt like there was lots of momentum, and Kevin Sumlin and the program that he was building at the time seemed great, and it was electric. Got to watch Myles Garrett play, even visiting teams at the time coming in, seeing, Dak Prescott and Mississippi State come in and play. Was just an awesome time to be at A&M.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of knew about Dak Prescott too because I think I watched Mississippi State versus Alabama, and I
Yeah.
want to say it was a very tight game. I don't know who won, but I remember that because I was much
Hmm.
younger kid, and I was like, "Dang, this guy's good." And then he falls to the Cowboys, and no one really knows who he is, and then he becomes, the
Right.
franchise quarterback. So it was pretty cool to see Dak
Yeah. And now they're
Prescott
going to
do
win a
well.
Super Bowl this year, so it's
Yeah,
great.
I don't know about that, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah,
Yeah,
49ers, listen, it's going to be tough to stop those guys. But now,
totally.
for you, you mentioned accounting and finance, and the next thing you know, after you graduate, you're working for ESPN as an intern. So, can you talk about how that opportunity came about with ESPN and how you enjoyed your time in Bristol?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was really just a wild thing for me because I never thought in my life that, I could do something like that. But I really, grinded it working at A&M for those 3 years and tried to learn as much as possible and just be a sponge. And naturally, doing work for the SEC network, we would have students that would run all the positions in the broadcast, but they would bring in ESPN producers and ESPN directors to come in and produce and direct us. So made a lot of connections that way and really, valuable connections. So my senior year, applied for the Disney College program, not really thinking much of it, thinking like, okay, well maybe. And then ultimately ended up going through a couple interview processes and then getting offered the internship in Bristol. Was awesome. So I graduated in May and then moved out to Bristol that summer for, I think it was a 10-week internship program. And it was really cool. So being a Texas boy, I had never lived anywhere else. So
Yeah.
just kind of packed what I could and moved out to Connecticut. And we stayed in dorms of a local community college. But just being surrounded by all the sports people at ESPN and the cool campus that they have there was just unbelievable, both from a fan side and a professional side. I tried to go in with the same philosophy of just being a sponge and like, who can I talk to learn more and more? And it was really cool, like shows I grew up watching, like got to work on like the Baseball Tonight set and, be with those guys or going to work on Sports Center and running cameras for those shows was a really surreal but awesome experience.
Yeah, that is super cool. And how big of a culture shock was that for you? I know you touched on it briefly, just going from Texas to Connecticut, because I'm a New Jersey guy. Very similar. I go up to Connecticut. I mean, you know, I can only imagine what it's like. So can you just talk about that and
Yeah.
how that lifestyle was for you?
Yeah, totally. It was definitely different. I had never seen so many trees and greenery in my life. Texas is great and has its beautiful parts, but for the most, it's pretty flat and a lot of nothing to it. So just getting to explore a different part of the country was awesome. And the cool part about Bristol was that, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to do in Bristol itself, but we took a day trip or a weekend trip to New York or to Boston to go watch Yankees games or Red Sox games or just explore the Northeast some. Was different for me, but it was awesome. I loved it. I will
Yeah.
say the biggest culture shock for me is my high school was only my graduating class was 40 kids.
Jeez.
So going from a graduating class of 40 students to, hey, I'm in my first lecture at A&M, that's 500 students,
Yeah.
and the student body as a whole is like 60,000. That was a big culture shock for sure.
Yeah. Now, in a school of 40 kids, do you have sports? Do you play like seven aside? I've seen all those documentaries about different types of football.
Yeah, we didn't have sports, that's for sure. So I grew up playing baseball and that kind of thing. But the school I went to didn't offer any really sports programs. We would have like a, play pickup ball on the weekends, that kind of thing, or some form of football that we would play called, it was called Thule ball, and basically kind of like ultimate frisbee, but with a
Yeah.
football. Um, but yeah, it was
Jeez.
something.
That's crazy to think about. Wow. And then
Yeah.
from there, you go from a high school with 40 kids at Texas A&M to ESPN, then to the Seattle Mariners and the Dallas Stars, working in two different professional sports leagues and organizations. How do you enjoy your tenures working in those sports organizations, and what did you learn in those roles that you had?
Yeah, no, I learned a ton. I'd always done student work or intern work, but it's always tough trying to make that leap from internship to, hey, now this is full-time professional. While I was interning at ESPN, I was just applying anywhere and everywhere at that point, didn't really care where I wanted to live or be. Probably sent in hundreds of applications, and I got one interview, and that was with the Mariners, and I figured it was a long shot. But interviewed with them, did some test edits and stuff like that, and ended up flying from Connecticut all the way over to Seattle, which was like a 6-hour flight, to interview with them. And I talked with their production team, and yeah, just got lucky enough that they wanted to take a chance on a young guy with some passion behind him. And I learned a ton. Going into that job, I had always edited on Avid, which is a more movie style old school editing software, to the Mariners, who were editing on Premiere, which was a more, at the time, younger up and coming editing software. So I had never even used the editing program before. And so kind of just forced myself to be in that position, like, okay, hey, I've got to learn this new editing program, this new language pretty much, and do all that. And I really loved it. Living in the Pacific Northwest was awesome. At the time, the Mariners were competing for a playoff spot for the first time in a while. So there was lots of energy. I remember at the trade deadline, they had, I think they re-signed or traded for something, reacquired Ichiro, who was a guy who I looked
Yeah.
up to as a kid, as like, hey, this guy is awesome, my favorite baseball player. And now he's coming to Seattle, so I got to film content with him. Growing up, I was a Cardinals fan, and when the Angels came to town, we got to do a little interview shoot with Albert Pujols, and he was my favorite player growing up. So I got to shake his hand and meet him, and just being around those guys was a dream come true. It was really cool for me, just as a sports fan. We went to Chicago for a shoot, and we're doing some extra stuff with Nelson Cruz. And, we shot with him, and then he invited us back. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to order a bunch of Cuban food. And if you guys want to come hang out and eat, like, we can do that after the shoot." And I was like, "Okay." So just getting to experience various stuff like that was just felt like a dream, but was really cool. And then, yeah, from there, ultimately made some connections and decided I wanted to move back home a little bit closer to family and all that. So applied for a job with the Stars, ended up getting that. I had never really watched an ounce of hockey in my life before. Not super popular in Texas, but since that job, it has been my absolute favorite sport to watch and see live. So,
Yeah, it's a fun
but
sport.
yeah, learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, hockey. I love hockey because my dad's a hockey guy. So I was
Yeah.
actually born into more of a hockey family. Learned how to skate as a kid, but started playing soccer, and the
Hmm.
schedules conflict. Hockey's a tough sport to play as a kid because the inaccessibility is really, I
Yeah.
mean, kind of its issue. But yeah, it's just so fun,
Hmm.
like so fast paced and everything. And I mean, I actually watched the Dallas Stars play against the
Yeah.
New Jersey Devils, and it's really cool. As a soccer guy, I peeped through the stands, and I could see them in the locker room. I don't know how to describe it really, but they're juggling the soccer ball before the game, which is kind of a
Oh yeah.
tradition on all the hockey teams. And it was
Hmm.
something, as a soccer guy, I appreciated a lot. So it was always pretty cool. And
Yeah.
then, yeah,
I
so
forget what the game is called. They played, it was something like hacky sack, but
oh,
with the soccer
keep
ball
the
where you have
uppies
to hit it
maybe.
up, and if you
Yeah.
miss, you're out, something like that. But
Yeah, it is cool. That's what we do in soccer as warm ups. But it's a lot of these European type guys
nice.
that yeah, they all play that. So it's really cool to see. And obviously the
Yeah.
Instagram teams, the editors always put that out there for guys like me. But
Yeah.
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 Anyways, just transitioning now from the Dallas Stars to Dude Perfect. It was in November of 2022. You took a job with Dude Perfect, which is one of the biggest YouTube channels in the world, competing right there for the top spot with Mr. Beast, T Series, and all of those channels. A channel I grew up watching, and they really haven't gone out of style, so to say. I feel like they always stay relevant with the times, even as they get older. Don't tell them I said that, but yeah. So they're
Yeah.
definitely like a channel that's always been very consistent. So what led you to taking that
Mhm.
job with Do Perfect, and how rewarding of a decision can you say that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had always worked in sports and just kind of figured I would stay in that bubble. And yeah, Dude Perfect is sports, but it's a little bit different than working for like a
Yeah.
sports team. At the time was when COVID was starting to hit and become a real big thing, and they weren't playing hockey games. The season had been shut down, and so I stayed on staff for a couple of months at the Stars. But ultimately, the writing was kind of on the wall that they were going to start, laying people off and letting people go just because we weren't having games. There was nothing for me to do. So unfortunately, got laid off from that job and was just kind of looking to see what was out there. And I had made a connection with Chad when I was at A&M because we overlapped by one semester in school. So his second semester of his senior year was my first semester as a freshman. So we had a small overlap, and we actually worked at the same, production department at A&M, 12-man productions. And so I had followed Chad and kind of knew him. And he was also roommates with one of my coworkers at the Stars. So having that connection with Chad, who has, been with Dude Perfect for the past, almost 10 years now. He's been their editor and their video guy since the beginning. Having that connection was super valuable. And I ended up getting in contact with him and came out to the team and did a test shoot with them, which was UFC golf with Doris Burke, and so got to film with them and just had a blast. I mean, what you see on camera is exactly who these guys are. The banter and the amount of fun they have with each other, it was just awesome to see, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. And since then, haven't really looked back. It's been over 3 years now, and it's just been an awesome team to be a part of. Not only for who they are as people, they're based in their faith, which is something that I take pride in too, and like to surround myself with, and that's been awesome. But just the content that they produce, it's fun. Everybody can watch it. I watched it when I was younger too, and here I am, almost 28 years old, and I still think it's funny. So being able to produce content that's universal like that and fun for everyone has truly been a blessing, and have loved every second of it.
Yeah, it is pretty cool because I remember I'm a senior in high school now, but in eighth grade, right before I get to high school, I remember watching Dude Perfect in class. I think we had a substitute teacher or something. I was watching an overtime video, and I start singing with my friend like "Tall Guys, Twins, Beer, Purple Hoser," and then next thing you know,
There you go.
the whole class was singing the Dude Perfect intro song, and then I don't know what
That's
inspired
awesome.
me, just like December. I was really bored on break, and I just started binge watching all these Dude Perfect videos. It was really cool to watch, like all the videos I never watched, ones that were like really early on, some more recent ones that
Mhm.
I missed out on, and yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
really never goes out of style. I think it's just so funny, like Tyler raging. I mean, nothing more classic than that. So it's just great
Yeah.
stuff all around. And one of the coolest things was Coby going to space, which I saw you put on LinkedIn, and that was one of the coolest experiences for you. So can you just describe that experience working alongside Coby in that project, and maybe some of the risks that were associated with that project for Dude Perfect?
Yeah, absolutely. So our production team here is 7 people. So sometimes we get projects that come across the desk that are really cool, but not everybody is a part of them, right? So we'll split up sometimes, and we'll have 3 or 4 people working on one project while the other 3 or 4 are working on another. So it's never a guarantee that projects that come through you'll get to work on. Obviously you can show you're interested in that kind of thing, but obviously the one like space is one that everybody is interested and wants to be part of. Just because it's not every day that something like that gets to that you get to do that. So thankfully I was asked by Chad to be a part of that one and got to go out to West Texas and film it. And it's one of those that just kind of transcends all the other videos and stuff like that, just because of how big it felt and how big it
Yeah.
was. I mean, especially for Coby and getting to see him go through the emotions of like actually getting to do this. And I remember, we're all really close with the families and that kind of thing, and just seeing his wife's reaction and seeing like how everybody felt leading up to the moment was pretty surreal. And so yeah, Chad and I hopped on a plane and we went out there to West Texas, and I mean, just the day of was just something else. We get out there and it's bright and early, 5 a.m., taking a bus out to the middle of the desert, and we sat down and got to listen from all the Blue Origin people who were great and just telling us like, hey, this is how the day's going to go down. This is the flight and all that. And just this real experience. We got to watch from, I think we were about a mile away from the launch site, and just seeing it with your eyes, knowing that Coby is in there, like going up towards literal space, was just wild. I remember holding my camera, trying to film their reaction, but also like trying to peek around myself so I didn't miss it. So it was one of those where I'm like trying to
Yeah.
get the good shot, but also like I want to see it. So trying to balance that, and ultimately, thankfully, got a good shot and got to watch it. So that was cool. I remember seeing it go up, and it gets, maybe 15, 20 seconds, and you see it. And then all of a sudden you feel it and you hear it, because the sound is traveling all that ways, and you see the sonic boom and feel it. And that was awesome. So just yeah, getting to capture content like that that's a little more story based, has some emotion behind it, is always a treat for us. We love the comedy and the sports, but something like that that's a little bit bigger than everything is just a treat. And then getting to take that footage and then trying to craft a story behind it is always fun, because the launch itself is only a couple minutes, right?
Hmm.
So how do you take that couple minutes and turn it into a 15-minute story? How do you tell beginning to end? And just, yeah, being a part of that project is definitely one of the highlights of my time
Yeah,
here.
that's awesome. And I mean, I can only imagine like seeing that live must have been absolutely surreal. And I know definitely what you're saying, because there's so many times too, even when like I'm at a sports game, you always see so many times where, and it's a great picture actually. I don't know if you've seen it, of Phil Knight. Everybody else is on their phone like this, and Phil Knight's just watching the game,
Yep.
watching the shot. And I always try to go like that. Sometimes it
Oh
creates
yeah,
for a
there you
bad
go.
video, but I want to see it with my
Yeah,
eyes, but also have it on my camera. So 50-50. But yeah,
there you
that
go.
that
There you
that's
go.
that's just awesome. And now,
Yeah.
as for the rest of your time with Dude Perfect, besides the launch, what's been your favorite memory that doesn't involve rocket ships and going to space?
Yeah, oh man, that's a tough one. It's honestly just the day-to-day life that I treasure so much. I've the other jobs that I've worked past this, while they were fun, most of the time they were still 9 to 5. I'm still coming in, kind of putting my head down and doing all that. This job is different in that you never know what you're going to expect on any given day. It truly is like if you were to imagine what it was like working with the people who are on camera, right? You come in every day and they're just being goofballs and cracking jokes. And yes, it's a ton of work. Don't get me wrong. We'll put in lots of hours to make sure the content that we put out is good. But Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint a specific memory, but just the day-to-day life in general and just getting to be surrounded by such a good group of guys is
Yeah.
definitely makes it all worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of the editing and the long hours, how long does an average edit take to make for a YouTube video? Maybe let's say like a stereotypes video.
Yeah, totally. So since we make such a variety of different content, every video varies. We've had videos that we'll crank out in 5 days in the editing bay, and then we'll have some that take a couple months. So a typical like battle video is a little bit easier. That may take a week or two. Same for like an overtime video, a week or two, just because we've gotten pretty good at cutting those types of videos. Something that's a little more different or long. So our bucket list videos, the ones that we go and travel and document the travels, those we like to budget at least a month or two, just so we have time to really craft the story. And those videos tend to be, 20, 30 minutes long. We'll come back with several terabytes of footage. So we'll spend, 2 or 3 weeks just going through all the footage and trying to cut just the good stuff that we want to use for the edit. And that takes a long time. So yeah, I would say for the most part, videos take about 2 weeks, which is perfect because we come out with a video every 2 weeks, so it kind of lines up. And but yeah, sometimes we'll spend upwards of a month or two on some of them.
That's awesome. And do you ever do two videos? I think the answer most likely yes, considering if there's several months, but like several videos at once in the editing bay that you call it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, oftentimes we'll have a couple projects in the can, we call it, just that are banked in our archives and ready
Yeah.
to be edited. The guys, the past I think 3 years now, have always done a summer tour where they go and do like a live show. So typically the first half of the year is kind of loaded where we'll be filming every single week, just trying to bank up content so that when they do go on tour, we can edit that stuff and still release on a regular schedule. And then there's times like right now where it's the beginning of the year, we're just now getting back. We have one video that we're working on right now, and that's it. So once that one's done, we'll wait for the next one. So yeah, anywhere between one and 4 videos that we'll have banked up at a time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now, finally, just to wrap up here, and I've asked this actually to Chad Coleman. He was there for when I don't know if you've seen the clip. You probably have. I think it was Cody who was blindfolded, did the behind the back shot in one take, the world record
Mhm.
shot, which is just unreal. Like watching Dude
Yeah.
Perfect, you always question. And I
Oh
honestly
yeah.
don't have any beliefs, but like, wow, how do they do that? Like, is that real? And I know it takes several days, which obviously then makes sense because you're doing it, it seems like a million times. But for you, what's been
Right.
the, I guess, craziest trick shot you've seen live?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll have to think about that. Um, Let me rack my brain for a second. Craziest trick shot. Okay. Yeah, this one kind of it feels like an easier answer now. So we went to Vegas earlier this year, and that was another one that I got to be a part of. And the goal was to break the world record for the
Yeah,
highest
I watched
basketball
this one.
shot. So that was
Yeah,
one that, yeah, we had, and then somebody took it. And for the most part, we were content, like, hey, they're going to have it. We're not going to try this again. That's
yeah,
crazy. Somebody on our operations team just randomly put it on the calendar, like, hey, we're going to take it back. And the guys were kind of reluctant at first, but ultimately they were like, you know what? Like, sure, we'll try. We go out to Vegas and we're there. We have 3 days budgeted, and I forget, like the second day maybe. And we had been going for hours and hours the first day and then hours and hours the second day. And I can promise you, not one ball got within 10 feet of the basketball goal. So we're not even getting close, right? So most of the time on trick shots, you're getting very, very close,
yeah,
repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. And then just one happens to go in and it's great. This one, there was none close. There was zero hope. Like none of us, we were like, okay, let's pack it up and go home. This is a waste of time. We go all the way until Tyler has to catch a flight back home. And the story we tell in the video is very accurate. Like
mm.
there was no way, no way, no way.
I think
And
that's what
then
made the
just
video not to cut
randomly
off, but
on,
that made the video so good, the story, because the suspense.
yeah,
My heart was
absolutely.
racing.
Yeah, totally. And the funny part is the video was originally supposed to be just a smaller, like a segment in overtime,
Ah,
and it was going to be a small something. But ultimately, I got to see with my own eyes the basketball travel from the top of this tower. I watched it, all the way down, just come and land in this hoop. And I mean, that moment, was so surreal because it was like, wait, like no way. A lot of the times people will laugh because the celebrations that you see on camera are excessive. But most of the time it's because we've been sitting there for hours or days trying the trick shot. So when you finally make it, it feels incredible. And yeah, getting to see that with my own eyes live was insane. I had been standing on the roof with everybody else, shagging balls, filming for days in the Vegas heat, and just to see that ball go in was unbelievable.
It's a lot of pressure on you because imagine it's like, oh, guys, wasn't recording. Let's retake.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And trick shot videos are tough on the film team too. Not saying, obviously it's tough on the guys
Yeah.
just to try and make it, but we're sitting there for hours and hours just you can't miss a single one because anyone could go in, right? So you're just having to make sure you film each one as best as you can. And it's definitely a lot of pressure, but when it goes in, the first thing you do is look down, make sure you were recording, stop recording, and take that card and guard it with your life.
That's great. And now, finally,
Right.
it's one everybody wants to know is, are you the Panda? Have you ever dressed up as the Panda? I'm not sure if you can answer. I heard that Chad Coleman said he signed a contract saying he can't talk about it, like an NDA. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
just
it's
curious.
funny. You think once you get the job, you'll get some insider info, right? Like, one thing I was excited to find out was like, okay, are the trick shots real? And
Yeah.
now I can confirm after 3 years, yes, they are very real. I was excited to find out who Panda was. But my first day of the job, they hand me a stack of papers and they say, hey, you got to sign all these. And I'm reading through it and it's all these non-disclosures and sign, sign, sign. So yeah, I can't comment on that at all. I can say it is not me. I have no idea.
That's great. Yeah, I have my own
Yeah.
hypothesis, but
Yeah, there you go. There you
at the
go.
end of the day, we'll have to make a chart after this and see who the Panda is with my friends. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the interview. This is some great insight, and for everybody watching right now, make sure to subscribe to the Sports Court. And I don't think I need to say to subscribe to Do Perfect because I think 60 million people are. But if you aren't, you should subscribe to Do Perfect as well. And Shon, thank you so much for joining the show.